The Constitution of the Provinces of Freedom Haven. Draft version 0.99. July 9, 2021. More at freedomhaven.org. Preamble. We the individual people. In order to secure the human right to defend ourselves, to limit the scope of government, and to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, so that we can have the chance to learn, grow, and work towards achieving our greatest individual divine potentials, so that through our efforts, and without compulsory means, prosperity may flow unto us forever and ever. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the provinces that form the country of Freedom Haven. We recognize that freedom is an essential ingredient for individuals to achieve their greatest potential. We hold to the philosophy of liberty as a means to improve upon the life that we have. The initiation of force is immoral and harmful. Any government, or any system of force, compulsion, or coercion, will naturally try to grow in scope over time. We oppose such expansion. This Constitution is established for the purpose of preserving the highest degree of freedom possible for each individual, while preserving the individual's human right of minimal force self-defense. It is also meant to be chains to limit what government can do. Article 1. Definitions. This Constitution describes specific concepts that existing, commonly understood words may not perfectly fit. For this reason, and to cover the possibility of society's definitions changing over time, the definitions of the most important words are preserved below. While the words below may have additional meanings outside of this Constitution, the definitions below will be used within the context of this Constitution, and all of them need to be understood in order to properly understand the intentions of this Constitution. These definitions are written in logical order, not in order of importance. Force, or compulsion or coercion, is defined as taking or destroying or threatening to take or destroy someone else's life, freedom, and or property. Force is a crime unless it can be proven that it was not greater than the minimal force needed for self-defense. Freedom, or liberty, is defined as living life with the least amount of force, or threat of force, used against you as possible. Freedom is a God-given natural human right, and exists in the absence of any government. Government cannot create freedom, it can only preserve, protect, restore, or suppress it. Freedom is the ability to use your life and property according to your will, as long as it does not take away from someone else's freedom to do the same with their life and property. Freedom is what you are naturally able to do in the absence of someone threatening to murder you, kidnap you, and or steal, and or destroy your property. For example, we claim the privilege of worshipping, or not worshipping, how, where, or what god, or gods we may, as long as the performance of that worship does not infringe upon anyone else's freedom to do the same, and does not threaten life, freedom, and or property. Life means sentient human life. This is any human with human DNA that has their own unique brain activity, regardless of their skin color, gender, beliefs, disabilities, dependencies, actions, history, intentions, or location. Human sentience exists when electrical signals are occurring in the brain. A human body that does not have any brain activity for a documented extended period of time, also known as brain dead or vegetative state, is the property of their legal guardians. Property, or tangible property, is anything that you can touch which can be owned. You cannot own another sentient human being. You, and only you, own your body while you are alive. Long-term actions that are deliberately intended to produce sleep deprivation can cause brain damage, which is property damage, and if that leads to deliberate death, then this is murder. Deliberately damaging someone's hearing through loud noise is also property damage, but in certain areas where loud noise is expected, it is expected that people take their own precautions, within reason, to prevent hearing damage. The only items government recognizes as property are tangible items. Control over intangible, or virtual items, which you cannot touch, such as information, perceived value, ideas, processes, etc., are not God-given natural human rights. People may choose to keep their intangible items concealed from others or secure them within their human rights of their own tangible property, but they may not attempt to control intangible items through the use of force on others. You are not justified in using force to control what happens with intangible items once they have left the control of your tangible property. Tangible property shall exist as either land, non-portable property, or portable property. Land property ownership. Multiple public decentralized databases should be kept by the people that record who owns which lands in Freedom Haven, with clear boundaries defined so that conflicts can be avoided. Where two or more individuals assert a claim to the same land, claimant who is able to assert the best claim is to be respected as the owner. The criteria by which the best claim is determined shall include the time at which the claim was first publicly asserted, and the use to which the claimants have put the land to. The greater the use, the greater the claim. Lands shall extend above to the height of the space occupied by the tallest owned solid structure, and below to beyond the depth needed to maintain a very stable foundation of all structures on the owned land. No person, or group of people, may own all of the residence property surrounding someone else's residence property without allowing them, and their portable possessions, instant reasonable free access to enter or exit their residence property at that person's own will and timing. All people should have freedom of movement to or from the established entrance of any residence property. Portable residence property. Any piece of portable property that can house one or more living humans is considered a portable residence property. The laws of a portable residence property are the same as the laws of the land that they reside on. If they do not reside on an owned piece of land, then the laws are the same as the outermost portable residence property they reside in or on. If they do not reside on an owned piece of land, nor on or in another portable residence property, then they can choose their own laws within the limitations of this Constitution. A property owner controls the use of their property. Any property that people own, and can give legal consent regarding, may be voluntarily exchanged between consenting individuals, but they bear the legal burden of showing proof that such a voluntary transfer took place. Violation of mutually voluntarily consented contracts involving property can be seen as theft of that property, and therefore may sometimes justify the use of force by anyone the property owner authorizes, to ensure all property ends up with its legal owner, according to the contract. Property owners have authority to choose who has physical access to their property. Individuals may disagree with the reason the property owner gives or may think the reason is invalid, but this does not justify violating that person's property. A residence property owner may evict anyone on their residence property for any reason at any time, unless a voluntarily signed contract removes some or all of this eviction right, but a realistic amount of time must be allowed to reasonably vacate the premises without suffering loss of life or limb. Contracts are responsible for covering what happens regarding reimbursement, if any, in the event of an eviction. Murder is ending sentient human life without consent, unless it is the minimal force needed for self-defense. Refusing to help someone prolong their life is not murder. Kidnapping is taking away freedom without consent, unless it is the minimal force needed for self-defense, which includes, but is not limited to, the following examples if no consent is given. Restraining, which includes rape. Imprisoning. Blocking access to the established entrance of any property. Providing addictive recreational drugs or other addictive substances. Refusing to help someone retain or obtain their freedom is not kidnapping. Theft is taking, destroying, using, or damaging property without consent, and is only sometimes justified if it's the minimal force needed for self-defense. Theft includes the following: robbery, invasion or trespassing, arson or vandalism, using someone else's property without their consent. This includes rape, which is physically using someone else's body for sexual intercourse without their consent. Refusing to help someone defend their property from theft is itself not theft. Defensive force, or self-defense, is using force only to defend your life from murder, your property from theft, invasion, trespassing, arson, vandalism, rape, etc., or your freedom from kidnapping, rape, etc. Force is only defensive force as long as the threat to life, freedom, and/or property remains active. Justice, retribution, and/or vengeance are not defensive force, and are not justified uses of force. An individual's human right to self-defense shall not be taken away unless that individual can be proven to be initiating force against others. For example, a shooter shoots an innocent person, and people nearby take the shooter's gun away and detain the shooter. Courts will assume that each instance of force was not for self-defense until it can be proven that it was. A person proven to be using force bears the burden of providing sufficient evidence to back a claim that this use of force was in self-defense. Only the minimal force needed to prevent murder, kidnapping, and/or theft is justified. The defendant will be responsible for any force used beyond that point. Government is any person or group of persons using force, regardless of whether the use was justified or not. To the people of Freedom Haven, government and force are synonymous. Anyone using force is government, and government only exists when force, or the threat of force, is present. Extradition is capturing an individual and sending them to a foreign government to answer for crimes against that foreign government that are not also crimes against the laws of Freedom Haven. Pollution is modifying land, sea, and/or air belonging to Freedom Haven in such a way as to reduce its utility, with the exception of any modification of gases that also occurs naturally from animals. Excrement can be released back into the environment only after most of the biological breakdown of the waste has completed. Article 2. Human Rights. There are no human rights, but those that exist for all people. No third party can take away an individual's human rights, and no government permission is needed to have and use these human rights. All human rights are based on the truth of self-ownership. Human rights do not include threatening someone else's life, freedom, and/or property unless it is the minimum needed to stop that person from committing murder, kidnapping, and/or theft. Therefore, human rights are those things where the individual human is sometimes justified in using force to defend, namely, the right to defend life, freedom, and/or property. Life, freedom, and property. Each individual person has the human right to maintain and control his or her own personal life, personal freedom, and personal property, after the corresponding age of consent has been reached. Defensive force. Force is only sometimes justified to defend someone's life, freedom, and/or property. Since governments naturally grow in scope over time, this constitution is established to block that growth, so that the least amount of force that's required to defend life, freedom, and/or property is used and the greatest amount of freedom is preserved. An imperfect execution of justified government action does not justify an expansion of government authority. All people are permitted to arm themselves with whatever weapons they believe is needed to defend themselves and others, with the exception of nuclear and biological devices whose primary purpose is to be a weapon, which are forbidden. Private property owners are permitted to further restrict weapons within their boundaries for the safety of their property, but these restrictions may only be enforced through the eviction of non-compliant people from their property. The manufacturing, dealing, and/or trading of arms and weapons are permitted as long as the arms and weapons are legal in Freedom Haven, and the process does not put anyone else's life, freedom, and/or property in serious danger. Someone simply having a weapon is, by itself, not enough to constitute a threat against life, freedom, and/or property. Since we oppose the expansion of government, only the minimal amount of force needed should be used in a particular situation, so that the situation is not escalated. This requires self-restraint when using force. While it is good to be honest with your feelings, we should aspire to be full of love and compassion. It is better to act out of love for that which you are protecting, than to act out of hate for the person who threatens what you're protecting. We the people are the government. Neither the government of Freedom Haven nor any organization has any human rights except for those human rights which exist for each individual person. The government may not use force, except the minimum needed to stop murder, kidnapping, or theft, as defined in this document. Any individual has the human right to defend life, freedom, and/or property as defined in this document, but when such force is used, that individual, or group of individuals, is in that moment part of the government and is subject to the limitations contained within this Constitution. The emphasis of government should not be to punish or condemn people for their actions, but instead to protect life, freedom, and/or property. People can change and improve, and government should not stand in the way of people becoming better than they were. The emphasis should be on providing opportunities to repent to those who seek to fix what they broke, and not on handing out vengeance. Establishment of provinces. The boundaries of a privately owned land, or portable residence property that doesn't exist inside the boundaries of another privately owned land, or portable residence property, constitutes a province. The owner of each province may have his or her own specific laws for implementing this constitution within their boundaries, within the following conditions. Laws of that province may not legalize anything forbidden by this constitution, nor can such laws remove any human rights spelled out in this constitution. Any such unconstitutional laws may not be enforced, but a property owner may evict people from their property as spelled out in this constitution. Every person is to have reasonable access to the laws of each individual province. Any changes to the laws of each individual province must be clearly and promptly communicated to all people who are interested, with sufficient reasonable warning for those people who don't wish to comply to evacuate the province before the law changes go into effect. Brevity of laws is encouraged. The boundaries and borders of a province need to be properly marked if the right to prevent trespassing is going to be upheld. Otherwise, people may unknowingly enter another province through no fault of their own. Provinces may use the laws of another province. Having multiple provinces using the same laws makes it easier for trade and goods to cross boundaries. If one person's portable residence property is moved inside another person's land or portable residence property, the laws of the outermost property takes precedence. If a land property isn't part of the equation, then the outermost portable residence will take precedence. A person should not bring their portable residence property into another person's land or portable residence property unless they consent to abide by the associated laws. If individuals cause any damage to another individual's property, owners may establish reasonable ways for people on their land or portable residence property to fully repay or repair the portion of any damages they cause that they are found responsible for. The same may also be explored for loss of freedom or loss of life. A person will be held responsible for fixing the damage they are found responsible for, regardless of whether the damage was caused intentionally or by accident, with the exception of situations involving deceit, where the person's life, freedom, or property was damaged as a direct result of that person deliberately deceiving others into thinking there was a threat that required self-defense. Both of the following are true, but since they conflict with each other, in each situation it would need to be determined, as needed, how much of either is at fault and bears responsibility for any damage that was caused. 1. Each individual is responsible, making reasonable efforts to keep their life or freedom or property safe from accidents that can cause damage, thus keeping them out of harm's way. And 2. Other people are responsible for not threatening that person's life, freedom, or property. Government, or voluntary non-government mediation, may be used to resolve issues between provinces of Freedom Haven, but this needs to be done in an orderly, publicly understood and publicly visible process. This may include, but not be limited to, the following: rescuing and retrieving someone held against their will in another province. Stopping someone who can be proven to be currently threatening the life, freedom, and/or property of someone in another province. Consent. Consent must be recorded in a way that it can be proven in court that consent was indeed given. If individuals are accused of using force, they shall be presumed innocent until proven guilty, but consent is assumed not to have been given unless it can be proven. If individuals are shown to have used force, they must prove their self-defense justification, or consent given, or else be in violation of the required limitations on force. Consent cannot be given to certain subject areas until after a certain age. Life. At age 21 you can give consent regarding your life, for example, agree to assisted suicide, etc. You can defend your life at any age. Freedom. At age 18 you can give consent to give up your freedom or liberty, for example, using addictive substances, trading yourself into slavery in exchange for products or services, such as indentured servitude or debt, etc., on condition that an end date is specified in the contract. Overcoming any addictions acquired, which were properly communicated ahead of time, will be the individual's responsibility. Property. You can give consent regarding your property, minus your own body, at age 8. Your legal guardian can provide the missing consent until that age. You can give consent regarding your body, minus marriage and sexual intercourse, at age 18. Your legal guardian can provide the missing consent for your body, minus marriage and sexual intercourse, until that age. You can provide consent to marry and/or have sexual intercourse to someone based on your age, and the age difference between you and the other person. 0 to 13 years old, no consent can be given. 14 to 15 years old, the other person cannot be more than 2 years older. 16 to 17 years old, the other person cannot be more than 4 years older. 18 or more years old, the other person can be any age. No guardian can give consent on behalf of someone regarding marriage or sexual intercourse. Power of attorney. After the corresponding age of consent is reached, a person can voluntarily choose to give authority, for a specified limited time, to another person to provide consent on their behalf. Sufficient witnesses of this bestowal of authority are required so that this can be upheld in court. The consent owner can revoke power of attorney anytime they want, as long as they provide sufficient warning to the holder of the power of attorney so that they know. Consent can only be provided by the individual or someone with power of attorney. Legal guardians have automatic power of attorney over their children or dependents, until they reach the corresponding age of accountability, with the exception of the child's life, which the child themselves can only choose to destroy when they reach their corresponding age of accountability. In all things, consent is required to be documented in a way that would hold up as evidence in court if needed. Consent cannot be determined by any vote. No taxation. No rights to government services. Taxation is theft and is forbidden. The government may not steal to fund its efforts. No government services are a right. If individuals want a service, but do not want to pay for it, they will have to find someone who is willing to offer that service for free. If no one volunteers to perform the service for free, then the service does not have to be offered. Individual people bear the ultimate responsibility to defend their own lives, freedoms, and properties. Individuals may grant authority to others to provide security for them. Each individual has the responsibility to be vigilant in order to protect his or her freedoms, property, and life. Each individual is encouraged to document each instance of tyranny, so that force is not used beyond the minimal needed for self-defense. Only the property owner may impose fees for physical access to, or use of, their property. No external government, group, or individual may impose any such fees or tariffs. Privacy. Government shall not have any rights to privacy. Government must provide timely public visibility into all actions it performs. Individuals not using force may choose to implement privacy, but not at the cost of another individual's human rights to his or her own life, freedom, or property. Privacy is best achieved by having control over your own tangible property. Individual human rights trump any vote of the majority. The vote of the majority shall never take away the human rights of the individual, as listed here. No extradition. There will be no extradition from Freedom Haven. If a government of foreign nation seeks to arrest any individual who broke their laws, they can only do so in their own country. They should not come to Freedom Haven seeking to arrest that individual. While they are in Freedom Haven, neither should they expect Freedom Haven to extradite said individual, unless the individual can be proven to have committed crimes worthy of banishment from Freedom Haven, according to the laws of the corresponding province of Freedom Haven. Representatives of those foreign nations are welcome to visit the provinces of Freedom Haven, with the consent of the province property owner, as long as they abide by the laws of that province, and do not threaten another individual's life, freedom, and/or property. No individual in Freedom Haven, including the representatives of other nations, is given any special human rights that are not also available to all other individuals. Visiting representatives of other nations will be required to abide by laws in accordance with this Freedom Haven Constitution, just like everyone else. Foreign nations may choose to prosecute members of Freedom Haven for laws that individual has broken in the Freedom Haven province they reside, in accordance with the laws of that province. Courts should be wary of evidence provided by foreign countries, since those countries may have an incentive to frame the innocent with falsified evidence, so that they can circumvent the no extradition restriction. Limitations. In addition to any other limitations listed here, any use of force or government action not justified in this Constitution violates individual human rights and is forbidden. Any laws, regulations, executive orders, etc., passed in Freedom Haven that are in conflict with this Constitution are considered null and void and shall not be recognized by Freedom Haven's courts, security forces, police, army, etc., or residents. Article 3. Borders and boundaries. Freedom Haven claims all of the various internal waters, territorial waters, exclusive economic zone, and other areas that exist for sovereign nations, with the exception of any area that overlaps with existing established exclusive economic zones. Freedom Haven will make no claims on waters that are already established as inside the exclusive economic zone of another nation. Any person and their property is welcome inside these national boundaries, conditional on their adherence to this Constitution and the laws of any province they visit. All people are considered visitors of Freedom Haven until they obtain their citizenship. To become a citizen, a person must have completed all of the following: have been present at Freedom Haven more than 50% of the time over the previous year, or be the owner of a province for at least 2 months, while being personally present at Freedom Haven more than 50% of that time. Be in full compliance with this Constitution, and/or made full reparations or repairs for all damages caused. Sign an affidavit of governance that requests their mother or father country stay out of Freedom Haven affairs, and asserts Freedom Haven as an independently governed nation. Citizens of Freedom Haven are free to also keep their previous citizenships from their home country. Freedom Haven citizenship can be revoked if a person is banished from Freedom Haven for failing to comply with this constitution. Any private land or portable residence property may also become an extension of Freedom Haven, as a new province member of the country of Freedom Haven, upon their covenanting to uphold this constitution and the freedom of the people. Any property owned by anyone not willing to follow this constitution is not welcome within any of the above-mentioned boundaries of Freedom Haven. In addition to whatever is granted as a country's right according to global norms, the country of Freedom Haven claims ownership to all water, land, and air within its contiguous zone, 24 nautical miles out, until anyone who is willing to abide by this constitution lays physical claim to that water, land, or air by enclosing it, at which point it will become property of that person and the province they represent. Enclosing a previously claimed property does not transfer its ownership, and as previously explained, the outer property cannot block access to or from the inner property. Any damages, such as pollution, as defined above, to the water, land, or air before it is claimed, as stated above, are not allowed, and any claimed water, land, or air that is damaged in this manner may not be returned to the area owned by the country of Freedom Haven until the damage has first been repaired. Freedom Haven is the territorial lands and/or seabed-based structures claimed under the Freedom Haven flag. The territorial water and contiguous zone around this territorial land or structure, plus all water, land, and air, normally acknowledged to corresponding host countries of the world. All ships on the sea that fly the Freedom Haven flag and uphold the Constitution of Freedom Haven. And any lands where the country wishes to be part of Freedom Haven. Article 4. Changes to this Constitution. We know that despite our best efforts, there will be imperfections in this Constitution, so there needs to be a way to modify this Constitution in the future. Other than the exceptions listed below, this Constitution shall be locked and unchanged starting from the day that Freedom Haven has populated the new land and declared itself a new country to the world. On the day when the first New Liberty 10-year lease has completed, this Constitution will be replaced by a new modified version presented by a committee that Anthony Charles Olson will establish for this purpose, on condition that no more than 10% of the Constitution, according to word count, will be modified. Or, the Constitution may be modified in any way as long as 100% of the land and portable residence property owners in Freedom Haven agree with the changes.